Greetings, this is Griffruby, the Nostalgia Catholic, with yet another Isaac Asimov short story review. Or in this case, more like a novella. And once again, you can see he's got the cover, sort of. Asimov is on there. I'm not sure how much the cover really relates to the story, beyond the one fact that given the nature of what's going into the lady's hand, she's a robot. That could be therefore supposed to imply doors venably. We can never do figure out which syllable. Venabili, or just absolutely venabile. Oh, yeah. Anyway, so here the story is called Cleon the Emperor, Isaac Asimov, and it is on page 240. And by the way, when this story gets collected into his final whole novel, not necessarily the last book, since the books have come out posthumously, but the last one that he sought the publication of, or at least a full-length draft, is Forward the Foundation. And it is included in there as Cleon 1, or Cleon the First. Because this actually focuses on Cleon the Emperor. Now, again, the magazine has some nice artwork. Right there in the first page, there's a character, perhaps that is Raych, or perhaps that is a gardener, given his very short hair. Gardeners apparently are male and female, are supposed to have short hair. That's just one of those little traditions. And in here you can see the faces. I suspect the guy is Raych and the girl is one who helps him. Oh, I'm giving away a spoiler there. Named Manella. So, nice science fiction type art drawing from Gary Freeman. And there's a blurb. Obviously, neither the artwork nor the blurb is in the book, but it's here in the magazine, so that makes it kind of neat. So, blurb reads, what better way to celebrate the 15th anniversary issue of Isaac Asimov's science fiction magazine than with the publication of the Master's thrilling new addition to the Foundation universe. This story will be part of Dr. Asimov's new novel, Forward the Foundation, which will be published by Doubleday. Well, now it has been, but this was before, so you could see at least this chunk of the book in the April 1992 edition of this magazine. Okay. So, it starts right in on with a quote from the Encyclopedia Galactica. And I've noticed that in the newer ones, the For the Foundation, and I think maybe Prelude, I'd have to check on that. Encyclopedia Galactica is from all quotations from the Encyclopedia Galactica here reproduced are taken from the 116th edition, published 1020 FE, or Foundation Error, by the Encyclopedia Galactica Publishing Company, Terminus, with the permission of the publishers. You go back to the original trilogy, it's a slightly earlier edition. Go figure. I don't know that it makes a difference, but I just noticed they updated that. So, our very first page introduces us to the character whose name is Mandell Gruber. He is a gardener. Turns out, on the planet of Trantor, that big citified planet, a planet-wide cave of steel, as it were, everybody on there, it's 40-something plus billion inhabitants, are under the big dome like a big cave of steel. The Emperor, however, carries forth a rather unusual tradition. There is, you see, the Imperial Gardens. Now, apparently, once upon a time, the Imperial Gardens were open to everybody when the Emperor could, hobnob with ordinary citizens and so forth. Well, that's remote in the past. You have to be very, very safe and so forth. American presidents went through the same thing, you know? It's mind-boggling to think how accessible so many presidents were until one of them got assassinated. And even after that, they were still pretty accessible and gradually made less and less accessible because you've got to have a secret service and those guys need to be on the ball. But that's nothing compared to what you got to do to protect a galactic emperor. So, given what we got with the Galactic Emperor, the gardens, however, are still there. That one garden. All the other gardens have gradually gone away. But the Emperor's garden is kept there and is kept maintained by a fleet of gardeners. Every now and then the garden will be replaced. The current design, as the story opens, apparently has been one that's been used for several centuries. Apparently it's a very nice and satisfactory design. And the master gardener who had come up with that design was from, of all places, Cleon, which is just another part of the Galactic Empire in those good old days. And even in the days portrayed here, Cleon is still just a part of the Empire. And so, in fact, Mandell Gruber also proudly comes from Cleon. I guess they're very familiar with the outdoors and gardening and plants and growth and living things and all the things you really can't do much of, and certainly not in any substantive way, anywhere else on Trantor. Which is why it is all of the gardeners they have are hired from other worlds and never from Trantor. I mean, what good is experience with potted plants when you're talking about a real garden that's full-blown bona fide ecosystem? So, turns out Mandell Gruber and Seldon, now running the Empire to a large degree as its first minister. So, if you remember in the previous installment, he got installed as first minister. Now he is first minister, but he kind of likes trying to maintain conversation with the ordinary person of the gardener, which is one of the few cases where you could do that. So they have some nice conversation, and there's a little mention about how not too long after the events of the previous part, there had been some plot to kill the first minister, which at that point was already Seldon, newly appointed to the post. And between the energetic activities of Doors Venabili and a very alert security force, and even a gardener who was going to do what he could to try to defend Seldon with basically what he had, which I think was a rake or a shovel or something, and also came running to try to help, but there was no need. Still, the thought counted, and Seldon always remembered that the gardener was doing that. He was just a good man, and the gardener could see that Seldon was a good person too. So the setting here, let's just say, it turns out to be surprisingly important. See, they're still worried about what can happen. They need to watch out for what can go wrong with the Empire. A little bit of psychohistory is beginning to develop at this point. One curious fact that Seldon has identified is that you can either maintain strength at the center or at the periphery, but not both. You have to choose. Needless to say, since psychohistory and Seldon are all happening at the center of the galaxy where Trantor is, he's going to keep the center and begin letting the periphery go. And it'll hang on for some decades from this point. But as we know, time will come that as the Empire finally begins to start collapsing, it collapses by having pieces of the periphery begin breaking off from the Empire and becoming their own little kingdoms and so forth. And then this process will gradually work its way in until towards the end of when you have even the final vestiges of a Galactic Empire, like the mule will find when he arrives, by the way, is an empire that consists of 20 agricultural worlds and all run from a planet called Trantor, because the original Trantor is, well, they've been driven off of the original Trantor, so they just moved their whole government to another planet and gave it the name of Trantor, which is to say New Trantor. I guess we have a New York and a New Jersey and a New Mexico and a few other new states, whatever, New Orleans, or cities, what have you. They have New Trantor. So, but at this point, the whole galaxy is still in the Empire, all the way to the furthermost stars of the periphery. So, having been given this setting here, and this little bit of background about the history between Mandell Gruber and Seldon, we now see we're back up to the current time. Seldon is now about 50 years old. So is the Emperor. They're right about the same age. Amiral is in his early 40s. So life is going on, and like I said, Seldon and Hugo, or Amiral, I should say, are working their psychohistory. It's real hard. It's really difficult. But they've got a team. They've got labs. They've got different things. So no longer trying to look through lead. Now it's like trying to look through very frosted glass. You can sometimes get some outlines. Alright, well, is the Empire in trouble? And in particular, the center part, Trantor. As it is, yes, it is. You see, things are getting decayed. Now, part of the decay is just from the fact that it's an old city planet. And so you got a lot of structures that have been there for a very long time. And they're just kind of starting to crack and collapse and fall apart under the stress of just having been there so long. And there's partly also a mention that sometimes Trantor, though relatively quiescent as planets go, does still have some very occasional earthquakes. And then it has to respond to those earthquakes in a certain way, and then it protects itself as a city. It's a city planet. It's capable of steel. But sometimes even the equipment to do that fails, which shouldn't happen. The other thing was, Seldon does a rather neat thing to see about something about these failures. You see, failures should be random. And what they were finding, they started charting where they happened, and it turned out the pattern was just a little too regular. This is not random anymore. This is somebody's planning these spots out. Who are they? So, once again, Seldon does something he had done before. He sends his son to try to go in and infiltrate. Who's doing this? Are there still some Joranumites? Possible. It's reasonable to expect they are. In point of fact, we will find, yes, there are. There's also the district of Y, W-Y-E, which was a place that, back in Prelude to Foundation, Seldon had spent some time just to kind of see an interesting and rather different part of the planet. So that was why. And they have somewhat different agendas. The Joranumites, what's left of them, in view of the fact that the Joranum himself quietly passed away out in Asia, died in ignominy, but there's still a tiny number of people supporting him, and apparently his right-hand man's been slowly trying to rebuild the organization as much as he could. Now their agenda is they're content to keep the Emperor in place as something superficial. So a figurehead, that's the word I'm fishing for. Keep him around as a figurehead. Whereas in the case of the Y district, and somebody from there in particular who's rather prominent in the story, he wants to be Emperor. Apparently, some of the emperors from way back when had actually been from the prominent family that leads the Y district of Trantor. But that was a long time ago, and apparently the emperors hadn't been all that particularly great, but they had been emperors, whatever that's worth. And there's kind of dreams of maybe that could happen again. So the agendas are different, but they kind of find ways to see these two enemies of the Empire, and most particularly of Seldon, and to some degree of Cleon the Emperor, as they kind of reconcile their differences and try to team up and see what they can do to overthrow the Empire. So Raych, Seldon's adopted son, decides to go to Y. He changes his look, shaves off his mustache, which for a doll-light is, wow, that's a huge sacrifice. I hope he has a chance to grow it back. We haven't seen here that he does, but I'm going to assume he will once this whole charade is over. He's shaved off his mustache, and he's done some other things to change the look of his face. The idea that he hopefully wouldn't be recognized. He goes to Y. People start to notice him. And next thing you know, somebody does know who he is, despite the change, recognizes him. His image is burned in his face because this is the right-hand man of the original Joranumites, Gamble, Dean. I'll just call him Gamble Dean for now. But anyway, he was the guy, Namarti. Gamble Dean Namarti. Namarti, however, still recognizes him and has a use for him. And he's got a plot to get people into the Emperor's area and the First Minister, because he really wants to target the First Minister. Replace the First Minister, get your own person in as a First Minister. That's who pretty much mostly runs the Empire anyway. And then when you want an emperor who will be a better figurehead than the existing one is willing to be, you find some way to replace him with your companion from Y, who doesn't seem to mind being pretty much a figurehead emperor. Okay, I guess that's their deal. That's the way they reconcile their different goals. And their trick is to get on the lands by taking some of their own people, including, most importantly, a drugged and brainwashed Raych, by sending them to other planets and bringing them back in as if they were gardeners from various other planets. Because apparently, the real question is just, can you garden? They weren't really too worried about anything else. And one reason that probably might have been okay is also, you're always bringing in people from the outside world. So you don't really know, so people of the outside worlds don't really know or care much at all about the internal politics of Trantor. So to them, an emperor is an emperor. It doesn't really matter. The guard's the guard. That's the thing they know. That's what they're going to work with. That's where they're going to be. So they're not scrutinized too closely. And it turns out to be easy enough to smuggle Raych in, our guy from Y that wants to be emperor at some point. And it turns out some other people are also smuggled in. But those are the principal ones. Plus the girl, Manella, gets herself smuggled in as well. So, and they come in as gardeners. So we have a section where, one other thing is that because the gardener's done, Mandell Gruber has done such a great job, the idea is floated that, he should be rewarded for what a great job he's done in his many years of service. He could be promoted to being a master gardener. That is exactly what he does not want. He loves being out there in the sun and the wind and the rain and the weather, working close with his hands, with the trees and the shrubs and all the little animals and everything else there is in the gardens that makes the gardens what they are. That's what he loves. That's what he wants to do. He would be absolutely happy, content, thrilled to do that for the rest of his life. And instead, he's going to be made into the main gardener who has to work in an office, be indoors, have virtually no contact with the gardens themselves, but he'd be responsible for managing things, planning any design changes, and there's talk of that in the air. It's never clear what, if anything, came of that. And also responsible for the hiring and the firing of the gardeners. And since the old main gardener is getting old and basically retiring, it's time for a new main gardener. And Mandell Gruber, the Emperor, just says, well, to reward you for your many years of service and your faithfulness and so many other things, we're going to make you the main gardener, the master gardener, which is exactly what he didn't want. But the Emperor doesn't understand that he's done a hard thing to the man. And the weirdest part is even Harry Seldon doesn't understand. He talks to the guys. He's his friend, and he doesn't even see it. Wow. Well, let's just say they get these gardeners in, along with a shipment of regular, real gardeners. And there's some shots. Some people are killed. Harry Seldon is not one of them. Amazingly enough, neither is Raych. The bad guy from Y is among the deceased. And we have one other casualty, which I won't spoil, but suffice to say, it pays to listen to the people, to the common people, and not just assume that they would want what you think you would want. Just because, oh wow, if I was a poor person, I wish I could have all the things that I in fact do have. Well, really? Maybe they might find more happiness just in the people they know and the work they do and the life they have. Comfortable, quiet little life that doesn't really affect too much other than the people immediately around them who matter to them. But, or things, Mandell Gruber wants to be with his garden. And now he can't. Well, anyway, I'm just doing this story as a standalone. Obviously, I will have covered what very few differences exist between the stories presented in the magazine versus how it exists inside the book. Which amounts to almost nothing. And so I cover that in the review of the book. So I'm just simply, for the stories here, I'm simply doing the individual foundation stories along with all those other stories, as if we're just looking at the story itself as a standalone, as distinct from how it fits into the overall tapestry of the whole Foundation saga. Thanks for listening.